Mic check 1 2, mic check 1 2.
Oh, you idiot.
Hello everyone, welcome to vlog number 2. I hope I learned something from the previous one. One of the remarks was you need to look into the camera. So I'll be paying attention to that, seeing if I can look into the camera a bit more. I have many questions that people left for me to answer. And today I thought I'd pick a few more. I'll pick 3 questions to answer, and then we'll just see what's up with that. Question number 1. How do you convince a client that fixed scope, fixed price, fixed time doesn't work, but Scrum makes it much more likely to be successful? How do you convince a client of that? The answer is you don't. You don't convince the client. So if you have to convince a client, it's an uphill battle. You may inspire a client. You may talk to a client. You may share what you think with a client. But I try not to try to convince clients. Because if you try convincing clients, what you get is something that's called resistance. Because the thing is, there's no convincing people. Doesn't exist. So what convinces people is you being enthusiastic about what's going on, you having experienced that it's a better way, you lighting up as you're talking about it. That's what convinces. And that brings it back to, have you truly internalized how this could work? Have you seen it work? Are you convinced? Basically. The second question. Someone wrote to me, we have developed a lot of product as a Scrum team. Due to internal and external dependencies, only about 10% of what we developed is on production. Now, there is nothing we could do about that as a Scrum team, right? Or should we sharpen our definition of ready to only pull stuff into the sprint if it's no longer got any dependencies on it? Only 10% on production due to internal and external dependencies. That's interesting. And then there's nothing we could do as a Scrum team. Now here's where I take big issue with, is there's nothing we could do as a Scrum team. Because you're not powerless in influencing your outside environment as a Scrum team, right? As a matter of fact, if you're a Scrum Master, what you typically encounter is, after about 6 sprints, usually, maybe a bit less, a bit more, there's not a lot of work with the team that will give you big benefits anymore. So as a Scrum Master, and ideally as a development team, as an entire Scrum team, you need to start influencing your environment. This whole Scrum thing is about empowering the people doing the work to influence everything so that they can be successful in product development. So to be stating there's nothing we could do as a Scrum team is not the attitude that you want to adopt. Remember, there's this thing in Scrum called impediments. Impediments is stuff that is in your way to be successful in product development utilizing Scrum. These dependencies are a prime example of something that is in your way and it's preventing you to be more agile, right? So how can you as a Scrum team start influencing your environment so that some of these dependencies will no longer be there? Maybe we can improve the collaboration with some of these dependencies so that we can develop more simultaneously. Maybe we can make some architectural changes that will eliminate some of those dependencies. So as a Scrum team, there's a million things you could do. And maybe it's not something you could do yourself, but you could for sure start influencing your environment to have some changes happen. That is, if you have a desire to be more agile. The thing is, Scrum doesn't make you any more agile. It doesn't. You know what makes you more agile? You start doing Scrum. You raise the awareness of what's in your way to become more agile, and you start making some changes in that. And that's called removing impediments in Scrum. That's the way you become more agile, not by implementing Scrum. Now the next question is about planning poker. The question is, what do you think about planning poker? And a shameless plug came with it. What do you think about ultimateplanningpoker.com? I love both. I do. I love planning poker because it's secretly something else than it purports to be. Because planning poker is supposedly about estimation. I love that it gives you estimates. I truly do. But it's not what I love about planning poker. What I love about planning poker is that it's a collaborative design session going on. So the format forces you to collaboratively come up with the best solutions to solve problems. And if you witness good planning poker sessions, it's a design session going on. And there's a ton of decisions being made, there's a ton of creativity being unleashed, and people really enjoy it. It's exhausting too. Now, closely related to the subject of planning poker is relative estimation and story points. And if you'd ask me what I think of that, I like the idea. I've never ever seen it implemented in a way that makes it useful for its original intended purpose. When extreme programming, Kent Beck came up with it in who knows when, I think late 90s, early 2000s. The idea was to express how much product you're delivering every iteration. So you end up with a velocity, and the velocity was an indication of your capability of delivering a certain amount of product every iteration. That's not at all how it's being used nowadays. The way it's being used is as a means of expressing how busy you are, not how much product you're delivering. So yeah, it's all fine by me, but there's still a lot of confusion, and some people think it's product delivered and some people think it's only for planning purposes. But velocity becomes pretty much a meaningless thing when you do that, except for maybe deciding how much activities to pull into the next sprint, not so much how much product you deliver into the next sprint. So a short tail sign of someone using story points for indicating how busy they are and not how much product they deliver is when they talk about how much story points they burned. You probably heard of that saying, we burned blah blah story points this sprint. You don't burn story points. You deliver story points and you burn time. So if you use story points that way, story points just become another way of expressing time. And that's just useless. You may just use hours. If you use story points, use them the proper way if you can. And that means only assigning story points in your product backlog and counting them in your velocity to things that are really product and not activities or components or whatever. That's a wrap for vlog number 2. Thank you for listening all the way through this. All of these ramblings, all of these opinions. I hope it helps. I'm sure it helps. See you next time. Peace out.